This is Gemara and Beitzah Daf Lam involved with learning as we conclude the month of Tishrei has been generously sponsored as a schus for Shlema for Shlema ben Yuta Mirtz Hashem. The learning of the entire Chabura should be a tremendous schus for his refuah Shlema, as well as the schus shidduch for Yisrael Chaim and the Verish Merim Bas Rizal Gittel Shandel Esther Bas Shana Makali Mordechai ben Dabashendel Gittel Bas Dabashendel, as well as the schus for Shlema Shlemius ben Henyefer Man of Feiga Chaim and Sar Shlomo Sib ben Rizal Edel Sar Bas Genendel Tabasiam Bas Chay Yisrael Yisrael ben Midel Ezer President Shavalei Shlema Bas Naomi Bas Shavigur Shechana Shmol ben Tila Tinel ben Chan Rizal Melchay Bas Dinena Bas Shina Mindas Fim Feiga Vernon Mchalesun Telu Rivka Bas Hashem Tel Zim Mechlaster Beisoich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on Lamed Hey Amid Beis. We're holding about 8 lines from the bottom. The first one line is Tanan. We began the parak yesterday. The word Mashilin, you're lowering the fruit from the skylight. Before we get into the actual halacha of lowering the fruit from the skylight, yesterday we dealt with what was the word Mashilin. Was the word Mashilin meant lowered? And we had 5 different ways the Gemara potentially could have said that word Mashilin, Mashchilin, Manshirin, Mashirin, or Mashchirin. 5 different ways that the word means to lower. Says the Gemara. Tanan, again, we're about 8 lines from the bottom. First word line is Tanan. Tanan, we learned from the Mishnah. Mashilin peiris derech haruba biyantif. You're allowed to lower the fruit from the skylight and yantif. So now we're going to deal with the actual halacha of the Mishnah. First we dealt with the terminology, the wordage. Now we deal with the halacha. You're allowed to lower the fruit from the skylight. Says the Gemara, ad kama. How much fruit are you allowed to lower? And I'm just going to point out right now, we're about to have a whole list of questions. I don't know exactly the number, maybe 10 series of questions, which are going to go from here all the way to Amud Aleph, halfway down the Amud, and I'll just spoil the fun. They're all going to end in one big fat teku. But let's get there. Let's at least appreciate the question, appreciate the comparisons the Gemara is going to draw. Says the Gemara, how much fruit you let to lower through the skylight on Yantif? Amar Rav Zira, Amar Rav Asi, V'amrila Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yechon, Ka'isa Shesheninu, like that which we learned, Mefanim Arba V'chamesh Kupai Shel Tevin, that someone is allowed to clear out of something that we had in the previous parak. You're allowed to clear out 4 or 5 boxes of straw, V'shal Tvu or grain, Memei Archin, for the guest, you have a room and there's lots of straw and grain in there. You're allowed to carry 4 or 5 boxes out. Why? Because you have guests that need the room, or you have a base medrash they need to learn, and because of that you're allowed to take out this large quantity of 4 or 5 boxes. So the Gemara thinks, so similarly in the Mishnah, how much fruit can you lower off the skylight? You have fruit on your skylight, you're afraid it's going to get ruined, you can lower 4 or 5 boxes full, just like we saw over there. You're allowed to lower 4 or 5 boxes, you're allowed to clear out 4 or 5 boxes of the grains for the bittul base medrash or the bittul archim. Says the Gemara, the obvious question that everyone is assuming, the dom shani asam the bittul base medrash. What's the rahaya? Maybe over there the whole reason you're allowed to do it is because what? Bittul base medrash, because people need to learn. But in our case, like a bittul base medrash lie, no one's learning on the roof. You're just doing it to save the fruit. So maybe you're not allowed to take such a large quantity, and of course the Isra would be tirchat, excessive work on Yantif. Now we have the other side of the coin. Maybe I can do 4 or 5 because it's Shabbos, and therefore the Chamiri Shabbos is very Chamer. Shabbos is Skila, so we're not afraid anyone's going to play with Shabbos. Whoa, sorry, I don't know what just happened. I apologize, and the whole page just went wild. There it is. And no one's going to come to you mizalzil in Shabbos. Hey, Avil be Yantif, 2 lines on the bottom to kill it. Yantif at a level is more kill, is more mekel. V'asi l'zalzule bei klal loi, and people might come to you mizalzil. Therefore, maybe you're not allowed to do anything. So on one hand, maybe the only reason is bittul beis medrash, but by us not. Similarly, maybe over there was allowed because Shabbos is very chomer. Yantiv not. And number 3, inami lidachki. So let's go the other side of the coin. Over there, why were we allowing it for bittul beis medrash, for archim, but not because you're going to lose cash? Maybe because in our case, if you're going to lose money, we're going to allow even more. And therefore says the Gemara, you cannot bring a proof how much fruit you can lower from the skylight, from the Mishnah of clearing out the room of the straw and the grain. And Hassan Tanan, now we go to another Mishnah we're going to try to compare from. You're not allowed to clear out a storage room. Shmuel explained over there in the Gemara and Shabbos, what does it mean you're not allowed to clear out the storage room? You're not allowed to clear out the Eitzer entirely. And now we want to say, why? Why are you not allowed to clear out the Eitzer entirely? Because if you clear out the entire Eitzer, the entire storage room, you're going to see the floor, and you might come to smooth out the floor on Shabbos. You're not allowed to clear out a storage room on Shabbos, says Shmuel. What about by us, by our lowering our fruit? Over there at Shabbos, it's very chomer, very stringent. That's why we're going to be machmir. Aval Yontif to kill Shabbat Dami, maybe by us we're going to be more lenient and will allow you to lower the fruit, even if the entire roof will be clear. Number one, or maybe over there, even though you're not going to be able to learn, the whole reason you're clearing out the storage room is to learn, and yet we're still machmir. In our case, certainly we're not going to allow it. Again, a very similar idea. That's another way. So again, we keep on trying to draw comparisons, and the Gemara says maybe it's not a comparison. Now we go back to another Mishnah. By us it says, when we say you can lower the fruit, you can only do it from your roof, but you can't take it from your roof and bring it to the next roof. But in the first wide line, we learned in a Raisa, even if the roofs are level, so it's not really more work to carry from one roof to the next, you're still not allowed to. What about over there when you're clearing out your storage room? Maybe by us, again, so far we've had two questions that we haven't answered. We had one question which we brought a raya from clearing out 4 or 5 boxes. We had statement number 2 in the Gemara and Shabbos of Shmuel about clearing out the storage room. Now we have statement number 3 that in the halacha by us you're not allowed to bring the fruit from roof to roof. Now we want to know, maybe only by us you're not allowed to. Why? Because it's yantif to kill. It's more lenient of us. So we're more machmir. Maybe you could even clear out from one roof to the next. By us, even though there's a loss of fruit, we still say you're not allowed to. Certainly over there's no hafsid, you shouldn't be allowed. And again, so now we're not sure if we could draw any comparisons from our case to the next. And now we're up to number 4. You're not allowed to lower with a rope through a window. Again, so we said in our Mishnah, you're allowed to take down the fruit through the skylight. But the Raisa explains you're not allowed to take it down through a window and a rope or on a ladder. Hasamai. What about over there on Shabbos when you're clearing out the room? Maybe on Shabbos, because people have to learn, will allow you to even use a rope, will allow you even to use a ladder. By us, you can lose money and we're still machmir. And the Gemara answers, take you where you have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi. Hopefully he'll be coming very, very soon to answer up these myriad of questions about 4 different scenarios, which we're not sure how to compare them. And that is how the Gemara concludes. Says the Gemara about 10 lines into the wide lines. So that was part 1 of the Mishnah, lowering fruit through the skylight. Now we're up to part 2 of the Mishnah, which said that you let it cover up fruit with a keli to prevent the drip from dripping on it and ruining the fruit. Amar Ula says, not only are you allowed to cover up fruit, even if you have bricks lying around and it's dripping on the bricks and the bricks are getting ruined, you let it cover up those bricks with a keli to prevent the bricks from getting ruined. Rav Yitzchak Amar says, Rav Yitzchak Amar, Piros are ru'uyin. That what's the case? The case is we have piros which are roi, which are suitable to be used on Yantif. Meaning, when the Mishnah allowed you to cover up the peiros, where peiros you're going to use on Yantif. Rav Yitzchak goes according to his reasoning. You're only allowed to take a utensil for something that could be used on Shabbos. So if I have fruit that I could use on Shabbos and Yantif, I could cover it with a kli because I could use that fruit. But bricks, which I cannot necessarily use, says Rav Yitzchak I cannot cover. So machlokes, can you cover the bricks? Ula says yes. Rav Yitzchak says no. Says the Gemara Tanan. Let's bring a raya to Rav Yitzchak. We learned in a Mishnah Machasan as a peiros bekelim, peirosin avir delivery night. Seemingly, the Mishnah itself implies like Rav Yitzchak. It says cover fruit. It doesn't say to cover bricks. Says the Gemara, no. Maybe the Mishnah even allows you to cover up the bricks. So why do we say a case of fruit? Because the Reisha said a case of fruit, lowering through the skylight. So it's not necessarily a raya from the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, let's try again. Tanan, another attempt to prove Rav Yitzchak that you're only allowed to cover fruit and not bricks. Tanan, the Mishnah continued and said, you're allowed to cover up jugs of wine and oil. And says the Gemara, so what's the raya? So the raya is that we're also items which are usable, seemingly only jugs of wine and oil, not a brick. Again, a raya to Rav Yitzchak that you can't cover up the bricks. Answers the Gemara, no raya. The Mishnah is talking about betivla. We're talking about wine and oil that's tevel, which cannot be used on Shabbos, and still you could cover it. So the exact opposite is a raya to ula, that you're allowed to even cover up items which are not usable. Now the Gemara proves that the Mishnah concurs with ula. If the regular jug of wine and oil that you're allowed to drink, the Reish already said you could cover up fruit. So why would I have to say why would I have to say case of Kadiyayin and Kadei So must be, says the Gemara, that it's a raya like Ula, you're allowed to even cover up bricks, like you're allowed to cover up jugs of wine and jugs of oil, because it's a not usable item, like the bricks you're allowed to cover up. Answers the Gemara, no raya. Different ways of learning it. Let's read the other way. The reason the Gemara said the case of jugs of wine and oils teaches a chiddush. Says the Gemara, even if you'll tell me the case of jugs of wine and oil are tevel, they're not usable, still maybe. Really we're going to say jugs of wine and oil that are usable. So why would it say that case? It's the same thing as the peiros. Says we're no, it's teaching us a chiddush. It's teaching us a chiddush. You would think less than merubach shashu. For fruit to get tripped upon, the whole fruit's going to get ruined. So maybe that's the case we let you cover. Less than more like shashu, but a jug's only get a little bit ruined. Maybe you would not be allowed to cover it, kamash malan, even for a small hefsid. You're allowed to cover it. So Gemara is concluding that we don't necessarily have a raya to Ula or Rav Yitzchak. Tanan, one final attempt to prove Ula that you're allowed to cover the bricks. We said in the last case of the Mishnah, you're allowed to put a kli to catch the drip. So seemingly, the drip has no usage on Shabbos. See, you're allowed to cover it, just like you're allowed to cover bricks, says the Gemara. Answers the Gemara, we're talking about water that is suitable for usage, and therefore there's no raya. And therefore the Gemara concludes that we don't have a raya, neither to Rav Yitzchak nor to Ula. Says the Gemara, so fine. So we exhausted the Mishnah. We went through each part of the Mishnah trying to prove Ula and Rav Yitzchak. No raya. Okay, what's next after we can't bring proofs on the Mishnah? The Beitzah. Tashema, let's bring a raya from the Beitzah. The Beitzah says, "Parsim machsal like Abel Levanim, you got to spread out a mat on top of bricks. B'Shabbos, diater mebinyana bricks. B'Shabbos, you got to spread out these the mat on top of the bricks. So what do we see? We see you allowed to move a mat even to cover a brick, just like Ula." Answers the Gemara, diater mebinyana. The case in the of that Beitzah is the bricks left over from building. The chazi lemizga alayu, you're not building with them anymore. The leftovers, and you can use them to sit on them, so they have a Shabbos usage. Tashema, another raya. Parsa machsal zagabi avanim b'Shabbos. Let us spread over a man on top of stones. Again, stones have no usage. Raya to Ula. Answers the Gemara, no raya. Bavanim krizolos the chazan Beitzah kisei. We're talking about stones which you use for the bathroom. They're stones to wipe yourself, and therefore they have a usage on Shabbos. Tashema, attempt number 3 from a Beitzah. Parsa machsal zagabi kaireis dividing b'Shabbos. Let us spread a mat over a beehive. Bechamim neacham v'gsham neagshamim in the summer or the winter. Ubelvad shleis kavin latzid. You can't have kavana to trap the bees. So what do we see? We see you're covering it over, even though there's no usage for it on Shabbos. Answers Gemara, no raya. Hasanami dikadavash. There's honey in the beehive, so there is a usage for Shabbos. Amali Rav Ukva Mimeshan Ravashi. 1 second, we have a technical issue. In the summer, you're right. There's honey in there. What about in the winter? In the winter, there's no honey inside the beehives, and the Beitzah explicitly said in the summer or the winter. So what are you going to tell me in the winter? Answers the Gemara, dude, the 2 rows, used to always leave 2 rows of honey inside the beehive so the bees would be supported. So there really is supported, meaning the bees would be able to eat. Meaning there is always honey inside the beehive, and therefore says the Gemara, there is always some sort of usage. Asks the Gemara, 1 second, those 2 rows are muksa. No, you had intent for them before Shabbos, and therefore they're not muksa. I mean, they're muksa, they're set aside for the bees. Says the Gemara, no, because you had intent. Let's say you didn't have intent. Ulcer would be ulcer. So now we have the classical kasha. What did the end of the Beitzah say? End of the Beitzah said, you let us spread out a mat over the beehive as long as you don't have kavanah to trap. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Why say that case that you don't have kavanah to trap? Lift like listening day. Differentiate within the case itself. But madvar mamurman is it allowed when you had intent? That's when you allowed to cover it over. Why? Because it has a usage. Because there's honey inside. But if you didn't have intent, you should not be allowed to cover it over. Answers the Gemara. It's an extra chiddush. Says Gemara, 1 second. But my ukimda, Rav Yehuda, this lay muksa. You're telling me that this whole Mishnah you're going within the confines of muksa, like the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Ema seifa. What does it say for seifa? Actually, it's kavin latzad. Seifa says you can't have intent to trap the bees. Who holds that if you have intent to trap the bees is a problem? Asi on the Rav Shemin, Tamar Davashin Miskavin is mutter. So the Seifa that says as long as you don't have intent, even if you're for sure going to trap the bees, it's okay. That sounds like Rav Shemin. So the Reish is Rav Yehuda, the Seifa is Rav Shemin. V'tizra says Gemara, 1 second. It's Rav Shemin. We know that in this case, even Rav Shemin would agree it's a problem. It's a psik reisha that when you cover over the beehive with your mat, it's for sure going to trap a bee. That's the way of saying you cut off the chicken head, it's going to die for sure, it's going to happen. Answers the Gemara. So what's the case? The case is that there are windows in the beehive, meaning it's not 100% you're going to trap a bee. The bee can fly out through the window. And don't say that we're talking about that it's going with the opinion of, V'lo tema lim Rav Yehuda. And according to Rav Yehuda, don't say that the Beitzah says, Ubilvad shli iskavin latzin, meaning according to Rav Yehuda, we have a different way of learning the end of the Beitzah. As we turn over to Lamed Hei Amid, Elaima, you learn the end of the Beitzah. Ubilvad shli yasenu mitsuda, as long as you didn't make it into a trap. What does that mean? You didn't cover it well, even covering the windows of the beehive. That's the case, it's a problem according to Rav Yehuda. Says the Gemara Pshita, that's Pasha, that's a problem. If you take a thing and you wrap it entirely, of course it's aser. Says the Gemara, no, b'chidish insad. Ma'u the tema b'minoi natzid aser shlei b'minoi natzid mutter. Concepts that we've spoken about. An item that's not normally trapped. You don't normally trap bees for pets. A dog, maybe an animal, a cow. The things that you normally trap, those are Isser Daraisa. But something like a bee that you don't normally trap is an Isser Darabanan. So you would think it's something that you don't normally trap, you'd even be allowed to fully unwrap it. Kamash Malan, that's the Chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda, that you cannot fully unwrap something even though it's not normally to trap it. Rav Ashi Amar comes like Rav Ashi and he explains the whole case a little bit differently. Says Rav Ashi, go back to the original Beitzah. You learned that the Beitzah was talking about summer, winter, and you went on. Says Rav Ashi, 1 second. Mika Tani, does the Beitzah say it doesn't say summer and winter. You read the Beitzah wrong, says Rav Ashi. It says it says the sun because of the sun, the rain because of the rain. You're covering over the beehive to protect it. It doesn't say winter and summer. Explains Rav Ashi, Katani biyoymei Nisan and biyoymei Tishrei. It's talking about Tishrei and Nisan, Dika Chama, Dika Gishamim, Dika Dvash. Says Rav Ashi, there are times you don't have to come on to this whole convoluted case. Says Rav Ashi, you messed up the whole thing. There are times that there's honey inside the beehive, and it's still the summer. But it's any Moshe Gishamim? No, because it still rains. Between Tishrei and Nisan, there are times that it's the summer, but it still could rain a little bit, but there's still honey. And therefore says Rav Ashi, that's going to be the case of the Beitzah, and you didn't have to come on to this whole fancy explanation. Says the Gemara, let's go into the final case of the Mishnah. Lamed Vav Amid Beis, 6 lines down, the 2 dots. You're putting a vessel under the water drip on Shabbos. We learned in the Mishnah, you put a kli, it catches the water, if it gets filled up, spill it out and bring it back. Ve'enoi nimna, and you don't have to stop. You got to keep on doing that the whole Shabbos, and you don't have to be worried about it. Says the Gemara, there was a millstone of Abaya, the luf that it was dripping on top of the millstone. I was like, so Abai came to Rabba and said, what am I supposed to do? Take your bed, bring it up to the millstone, and then what's going to happen? It's going to be disgusting, and you're not going to be able to handle it. And once it's not going to be able to handle it, lahasam, and it's going to become a situation of a grav shel rei. It's going to be gross. You're going to be sitting there on your bed, and it's going to be dripping everywhere. And once it's grav shel rei, and then you can take it out. So says Rabba, bring up your bed, create a situation about grav shel rei, and therefore you'll be allowed to remedy and make sure your millstone doesn't get ruined. Abai didn't understand the words of his Rebbe Rabba. You're allowed to do that. You're creating a situation of grav shel rei. As he was contemplating, his millstone fell and got ruined. Amar and Abai said, hastily, it was fitting for me, Davri Adamar, because I didn't listen to my Rebbe. And the Mefarshim speak out, even though, excuse me, even though he's being more machmer than his Rebbe. Still, when the Rebbe says something, you have to listen. What's the reason? Different answers. Maybe it's because of hefsid. That's why we're making, etc. Amar Shmuel says, Shmuel, grav shel rei v'avid shel mimi raglayim. Once we're on the topic of grav shel rei, which we know is a category that even something which is muksa, if it's disgusting, you're allowed to move it. Says Shmuel, a grav shel rei literally is referring to a vessel for the rei, for the excrement, or avid shel mimi raglayim, or you have a bucket for the urine. Says Shmuel, mutar lo yitzin la'ashbri, allowed to carry them out to the garbage. Ukshu machziroi, but when you bring it back, what's your heter to bring it back? To carry it out, it's disgusting. But how do you let it bring back the porta potty? How do you let it bring back the bucket? It's muksa, it's gross. How do you let it bring it back? Says Shmuel, noisin by mayim, put a little bit of water in it, umachzira, and you can bring it back. Savar minei, grav shel rei agam mana in, b'fnei atzmai lai. So the Gemara thought from here, you know the reason being, you're allowed to carry the grav shel rei only with a vessel. But b'fnei atzmai, but the item itself, if it's gross, you can't bring it back. And that's why Shmuel required you to put some water inside the item, create a usage, and then you can bring it back in. But says the Gemara, no, Tashamadu achbara dishtakach be'as paramaki. There was a mouse that they found inside the spices, the Ravashi of Ravashi. And Amlu Ravashi said, take this mouse by the tail, pick it up and throw it out. So says the Gemara, even though Shmuel made it sound like you're not allowed to move the grav shel rei by itself, it's not true. Ravashi taught us if something is disgusting, you have a mouse inside your things, you got to pick up the mouse with your hand, even though mouse is muktzah, there's no usage. We let it pick it up because it's disgusting and throw it out. I'll just point out, this is one of the big sources. What is a grav shel rei? How disgusting is disgusting? Moshe Feinstein famously says, Imi imot, as long as it's something that's not pleasant to you, so long as it's something that you don't like, that's enough to be called a grav shel rei. But if you look at our Gemara, this is one of the rayas, the Gemara uses a toilet, the Gemara uses a mouse, the Gemara uses things which are properly disgusting, and therefore maybe that's one of the rayas. Again, la halacha, we're generally a bit more call it liberal, like Ramesha, that something that just bothers you, something that's gross, that itself will be a grav shel rei. You'll have to move it on Shabbos. Let's learn the Mishnah and call it a day. Says the Mishnah, Kol shechayavin alav mishum shavos, mishum rishos, mishum mitzvah, b'Shabbos chayavin alav b'yamtif. Anything, Kol shechayavin alav mishum shvos. Anything you're chayav on because it's a din d'rabban. Mishum rishos, because you don't have to do it, it's not mandatory. Mishum mitzvah, you have to do it b'Shabbos. Chayav and love b'yantiv, you have to do it on yantiv as well. Which of course, the Gemara is going to go through each one of these things. The Mishnah is going to start right now, and the Gemara will continue. And now the Gemara says, ve'elu ein mishum shvos, what are dinei d'rabbanan that apply to Shabbos and yantiv alike? La'olam b'lilan, you can't go on the tree. La'yoich v'nagah behema, you can't ride an animal. V'lo shatan al pnei hamayim, and you can't go swimming on top of the water. V'lo mitavchen, you can't clap. V'lo misafkin, you can't slap your thigh. V'lo meraktin, you can't dance. Ve'elu, that's category number one of dinei d'rabbanan that apply to yantiv. Ve'elu mishum rishos, the following items are not really mitzvahs, and yet the Chazal said they're also on yantiv and Shabbos. Lo danin, you can't judge a court case. Lo mikachin, you can't get married. Lo chaltin, you can't do chalitza. Lo miyamin, you can't do gibum. Ve'elu ein mishum mitzvah, category number three, and the following cases are cases which are mitzvahs and still are aser. Again, each one of these things which are different levels but still are aser. The category number three, lo mikachin, you can't do kedushin. Lo ma'arichin, you can't give an erich, a vow to Beis Hamikdash. Lo macharimin, you can't put someone to cherem. Lo magbiyim trumas amaisers, and you can't pick up trumas amaisers. Kol elu biyantiv amru kal v'choymer b'Shabbos, certainly on Shabbos. And biyantiv l'Shabbos, the famous statement al oichal nefesh b'vad, aside for cooking. We'll pick up for the Gemara, which the Gemara is going to go a bit deeper into each one of these cases in Beitzah tomorrow.